Welcome to our deep dive today. And we're going to be looking at this book. It's
Yeah.
called Sequel to the Parliament of Religions.
Mm.
And it's a pretty unique book.
Yeah.
It imagines this conversation between representatives from Confucianism, Buddhism, and Islam
Wow.
as they're sailing home from the 1893 Parliament of Religions in Chicago.
I see.
And, it's interesting to think about
Yeah.
that time period, right? The world before airplanes, before Zoom calls,
Oh, yeah.
where to gather religious leaders from all over the world
Right.
was this like massive undertaking.
Absolutely.
We're talking about a time when, religious tension and colonialism were the norm.
Mm.
So to even have these figures talking to each other is a pretty big deal.
I see.
And what's cool about this book is we get to kind of listen in on their private conversation as they're discussing, faith and progress and
It's
all
valid.
these different ideas. Like we've stumbled upon this time capsule,
It is a
letting us peek into how these religious thinkers might have reacted to the massive changes that were happening in the late 19th century.
like eavesdropping on history in that thing.
So picture this. You're on the deck of a ship. The endless ocean is stretching out before you.
Okay.
And these three figures are deep in conversation.
Uh-huh.
We've got Falil Ristabatani representing Islam.
Okay.
Tseluyen Mugata, a Confucian scholar,
Hmm.
and Arjuna Samadura, a Buddhist.
I see.
They've just witnessed this unprecedented event, this global interfaith gathering,
Right.
and now they're trying to wrap their heads around what it all means.
Wow.
And right off the bat, their cultural and philosophical differences bubble to the surface.
Okay.
Yen Bugata, the Confucian scholar, is blown away by America's technology and industry.
Uh,
But he's also deeply unsettled by what he sees as some serious social problems.
like what?
Things like gun violence and a lack of respect for authority.
Right.
It's a stark contrast to the Confucian values of social harmony and respecting your elders.
Makes sense.
It's almost like he's experiencing future shock, right?
Yeah.
He's been catapulted into this whirlwind of progress, and he's not sure if it's a good thing.
I see.
It kind of makes me think about how we grapple with similar anxieties today.
Oh, yeah.
We have all this amazing technology,
Mhm.
but are we losing sight of our values?
That's a good point.
And that tension between progress and tradition is a thread that runs through this whole conversation.
Okay.
Falil, the Islamic scholar, is passionate about protecting individual creativity,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to intellectual property rights.
Mm.
He believes authors should have just as much legal protection for their work as someone who owns physical property.
Interesting.
Wait a minute, isn't that a kind of a modern concept, intellectual property?
Yeah, you don't.
It's fascinating to hear that being debated back then.
Think about it that way, do you?
It shows that these timeless questions about the role of government censorship,
Yeah.
how we balance individual expression with the common good, were already being wrestled with over a century ago. This book captures that struggle in a way that feels incredibly relevant to us.
I see that.
Think about all the debates we have now about copyright laws and online censorship.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like history repeating itself.
It is.
But let's get back to our travelers.
Okay.
Yen Mugata, being a scholar,
Uh-huh.
can't resist sharing this rich history of Confucianism and its
Yeah.
impact on Chinese society.
Okay.
He paints this vivid picture of how Confucianism rose and fell throughout different dynasties.
Right.
We hear about these key figures, Yaoshen Yutang King,
Mhm.
Confucius himself, and Mencius, his famous follower. It's like a crash course in ancient Chinese philosophy.
It's amazing how much information.
And what I find interesting is how Yen Mugata emphasizes these classic Confucian texts, like
Right.
the Book of Changes Chungyang and The Great Learning.
Right.
These books provided like the moral compass and social structure for Chinese civilization for centuries.
So long.
He's making a case for the power of tradition, a system that prioritizes ethical behavior and social order.
I see.
But are these ancient ideas really relevant to us today? I mean, how many of us have actually read the Book of Changes?
That's true. But if you dig a little deeper, you'll find some of these Confucian principles are surprisingly timeless.
Oh, really?
Like ideas like hold fast sincerely to the mean,
Okay.
or the understanding that the mind of man is restless, prone to err, or the beautiful notion that self-sacrifice and truth and benevolence are one.
Wow.
These are concepts that can speak to anyone regardless of their background or beliefs.
You know, you're right. There's something about those sayings that just resonates even if you haven't studied Confucianism.
Yeah, they tap into
Yeah.
this universal human experience.
Exactly. And what's intriguing is that while Confucianism is very focused on the practical and the worldly,
Yeah.
it does acknowledge a higher power referred to as Ti, but it doesn't really dwell on the afterlife.
Oh, yeah.
The emphasis is on living a virtuous life here and now.
That makes sense.
And this is where Arjuna the Buddhist steps in with a different perspective.
Okay.
He believes Buddhism offers a more complete solution to the problem of human suffering.
Okay.
He acknowledges that suffering is a universal experience woven into the fabric of existence. He argues that true liberation comes from self-awareness, meditation, and detaching ourselves from worldly desires.
It's radical, isn't it?
It's a radical idea, right? The path to happiness lies in letting go.
Like giving up on all things we usually
Definitely goes against our usual
and
instincts.
strive for.
But tell me more about these Buddhist concepts, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path.
Sure.
I've heard those terms before, but never really understood what they meant.
So the Four Noble Truths lay out the nature of suffering, its cause, the possibility of ending it, and the path to get there.
Okay.
And the Eightfold Path is basically a set of guidelines for right thinking, right speech, right action, and so on, all aimed at reaching a state of enlightenment, or what Buddhists call nirvana.
It sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
But if suffering is inevitable, as Arjuna claims, why even bother striving for enlightenment?
That's the philosophical puzzle at the heart of Buddhism.
Yeah.
It's a question that anyone who's experienced hardship or loss can relate to.
I can see that.
The Buddhist perspective offers a way to find peace amidst all the chaos, to accept what is, and to cultivate inner peace, even when things are tough.
Yeah.
It's about finding that stillness within.
So Confucianism is about finding harmony in the world,
Right.
while Buddhism is about finding harmony within yourself.
You got it.
Two very different approaches to finding meaning and purpose in life.
Two sides of the same coin, maybe?
And now Khalil jumps back into the conversation,
Okay.
suggesting that Islam might offer a middle ground between these two seemingly opposite viewpoints.
Interesting.
He explains that Islam emphasizes submission to God's will and that the hope for a blissful afterlife motivates righteous living. The very word Islam means resignation.
Okay.
And this concept has a profound impact on how Muslims approach everyday life.
I see.
Interestingly, Khalil points out that both Islam and Buddhism stress self-control and discipline,
Right.
but their ultimate goals are different.
Okay.
Buddhists are seeking liberation from the cycle of suffering and rebirth,
Yeah.
while Muslims aim to live in accordance with God's will, hoping to attain paradise after death.
Two very different afterlives.
It's fascinating to hear them unpack these different concepts of the afterlife.
Right.
It's like they're each holding a piece of the same puzzle, but they're not quite sure how to fit them together.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable is that despite their differences, all three traditions share some core values.
Like what?
They all believe in a supreme being,
Okay.
they all emphasize moral behavior, and they all promote a sense of brotherhood or compassion.
I see.
So they did find some common ground at least.
It sounds like.
And the book even suggests that these seemingly distinct religions might be pointing towards a common source,
Really?
a shared understanding of what it means to be human and to seek truth. They even reference the universal prayer agreed upon at the parliament,
Oh, wow.
which shows their collective belief in a higher power and the desire for guidance.
That's powerful.
Okay, so we've got Confucianism, Buddhism, and Islam all in the mix.
Right.
But then just as you think you're getting a handle on things,
Yeah.
a new character stumbles onto the scene.
Oh, no.
A self-described Israelitish Christian.
This is about to get good.
I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
Me too.
This is already feeling like a detective story.
Definitely. Welcome back to our deep dive into this fascinating conversation from 1894. Remember we left off with a new character kind of stepping onto the scene, the Israelitish Christian, and his arrival really shakes things up.
Yeah, he just stumbles upon this intense discussion about the Parliament of Religions and like jumps right in.
He does.
He must have something pretty interesting to say.
He does. And he's not afraid to be provocative.
Okay.
He argues that Christianity offers a unique perspective on history and truth, one that's grounded in evidence and prophecy. And he starts by pointing to the Hebrew Bible,
Okay.
and specifically its detailed prophecies about empires.
Prophecies. Okay.
He claims these prophecies have actually come true historically speaking.
Like, give me an example. I love a good historical mystery.
Well, he brings up the story of Alexander the Great sparing Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah. Alexander the Great.
Here you have this mighty conqueror, Alexander, who's been on a roll, crushing everyone in his path. But when he gets to Jerusalem, something unexpected happens. He encounters the city's high priest, and instead of conquering the city,
Yeah.
he shows it respect and leaves it unharmed.
Wow. Alexander the Great, known for his ruthlessness, just decides to walk away from Jerusalem.
Pretty remarkable, right?
Yeah.
And our Israelitish Christian claims that this event was actually foretold in the Hebrew Bible centuries earlier. He sees this as proof that the Bible isn't just a collection of stories and moral teachings,
Right.
but that it contains prophecies that have been validated by history.
It makes you think twice about those stories we might have heard in Sunday school, but never really thought about too deeply.
For sure.
What else does he bring up?
He also points to the survival of the Jewish people throughout history as evidence of a divine purpose.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. They've been conquered, scattered, persecuted.
Yeah.
And yet they've managed to maintain their identity and traditions for thousands of years.
That's true.
He suggests that this points to something larger at play, something miraculous.
It's a testament to their resilience.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm hooked. What other evidence does he present?
This is where it gets really interesting. He brings up the Septuagint.
The what?
The Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible that was commissioned centuries before the time of Jesus.
Okay.
He argues that this translation wasn't just a random occurrence. To him, it demonstrates God's plan to reach out to the Gentiles, to spread his message beyond the Jewish people. It was like setting the stage for Christianity to emerge.
So this ancient translation becomes like a key part of his argument.
Exactly.
It's like he's saying God is already laying the groundwork for Christianity centuries in advance.
That's the idea.
Wow.
It shows a level of forethought, a plan unfolding across history.
Okay.
But while he's making this case for the importance of the Hebrew Bible,
Right.
he's also pretty critical of modern Christianity.
In what way?
He believes that many Christians today have lost sight of these historical and prophetic foundations.
So it's not enough to just focus on like the moral teachings of the New Testament. You have to understand the historical context,
Yeah.
the deep roots that go back to the Old Testament.
That's how he sees it.
Okay.
And it's interesting because his criticism echoes some of Yen Mugata's concerns about the West. Remember, Yen Mugata was impressed by America's technology, but troubled by what he perceived as decline in moral values and respect for tradition.
Oh, you're right. There's a common thread there.
Yeah.
Both of them are expressing like a longing for a more historically grounded faith.
Exactly.
One that's connected to a larger narrative.
Absolutely.
It seems they both feel that something's been lost in the rush toward progress and modernity.
For sure.
Okay, so this Israelitish Christian has made some pretty bold claims.
He has.
But how does he address Arjuna's question about the ultimate source of truth? You know, the question that started this whole debate.
Well, he argues that the answer lies within the Hebrew Scriptures. He believes all religions in their purest forms are reflections of the truth revealed in the Bible.
Whoa, okay.
He even goes so far as to suggest that Eastern religions like Buddhism and Confucianism carry traces of the Abrahamic covenant,
Really?
hinting at a shared ancestry that stretches back to the dawn of humankind.
I'm guessing the others aren't exactly thrilled with that idea. They've spent a lot of time defending their own traditions.
Yeah, you can imagine the tension in the air.
And now he's saying it all basically stems from the Hebrew Bible.
Falil Yen Mugata and Arjuna would naturally find his claims challenging.
Right.
Their own traditions have long and complex histories.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be easy to just accept that they're branches off of another tree, so to speak.
It's like he's asking them to completely rethink their entire understanding of their faiths.
It's a big ask.
But he doesn't just make these assertions. What evidence does he offer to back them up?
He starts by pointing to the common belief in primal innocence, followed by a fall from grace.
Okay, like Adam and Eve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that the concept of karma in Hinduism, and the Buddhist idea that we're trapped in a cycle of rebirth fueled by desire.
So he's saying these shared narratives aren't just coincidences, but echoes of a single original truth
That's the idea.
that has been passed down through different cultures.
He's looking for those universal threads.
Wow. Okay.
And to strengthen his argument, he presents this fascinating historical timeline that connects key figures like King Solomon Buddha and Jesus. He points out that Solomon was already a wise king when Buddha was still a young man.
I never thought about it that way. It flips the script on how we usually think about the progression of Eastern and Western thought. We
Well,
tend to think of Eastern traditions as being much older.
it's a detail that makes you pause and reconsider.
For sure.
And he uses this chronology to support the idea that wisdom flowed from east to west, starting with the biblical account of Solomon's interaction with the Queen of Sheba.
Oh, right.
She traveled from a distant land to seek his wisdom.
It's like he's weaving this tapestry of historical events and scriptural references to make his case.
That's a great analogy.
It's like a historical detective piecing together clues from across time and cultures.
And just when you think he's laid out all his cards,
Yeah.
he introduces another intriguing piece of the puzzle. Zoroaster?
Zoroaster. Who's that?
Now you might be asking yourself who's Zoroaster, but this mysterious figure, the founder of Zoroastrianism, could be the missing link that connects it all.
Okay, you've got me on the edge of my seat. Tell me more about this Zoroaster.
So Zoroaster lived in ancient Persia, and his teachings combined elements of both Indian and Hebrew thought.
Okay.
He believed in one God,
Uh-huh.
the concept of good and evil locked in an eternal struggle, and the coming of a future savior who would restore righteousness to the world.
Those ideas sound familiar.
They do. There are definite parallels to both Eastern and Western religions there.
Yeah, it's like he's bridging the gap between two seemingly separate worlds.
And that's precisely what our Israelitish Christian is suggesting.
Okay.
He believes that Zoroastrianism, along with Buddhism and Confucianism, all bear traces of the Abrahamic covenant. He's hinting at a shared ancestry that can be traced back to the time of Moses.
So he's not just saying that these religions were influenced by the Hebrew Bible, he's arguing that they all emerged from the same source.
Yeah, that's a bold claim.
But how does he explain that connection? It seems like a pretty big leap.
Well, he points to a fascinating detail in the story of Moses that we often overlook. After Moses kills the Egyptian slave master, he flees to Midian. There he meets Jethro, a Midianite priest. Eventually, Moses marries Jethro's daughter and spends 40 years tending Jethro's flocks.
Okay, I vaguely remember that part of the story. But how does that connect to Zoroaster?
According to our Israelitish Christian, Jethro later became known as Zoroaster.
Hold on, are you saying that the Christian believes Moses' father-in-law was Zoroaster?
It's definitely a bold claim,
Yeah.
and there's no definitive historical evidence to prove it. But remember, we're exploring a fictional conversation here,
Right.
and this character is presenting his interpretation of history and scripture. Whether or not you agree with him is a fascinating idea to consider.
You're right. It challenges us to think outside the box and question our assumptions about how these ancient traditions might be connected.
That's what makes this book so thought-provoking.
But if he's right, it means that Zoroastrianism acted as a bridge, carrying these Abrahamic ideas eastward and influencing the development of religions like Buddhism and Confucianism.
That's exactly what he's suggesting.
Yeah.
He's constructed this intricate timeline, woven together from scriptural interpretation, historical analysis, and even linguistic connections. He's linked Solomon, Buddha, Zoroaster, and Jesus, drawing lines of influence across centuries and continents.
It's an audacious argument for sure.
It is.
And it definitely raises more questions than it answers. I'm sure Falilya Mugata and Arjuna have a lot to say about all of this. They're not going to just sit back and accept this interpretation of their faiths without pushing back.
Oh, absolutely. The conversation is about to get even more heated, and the stakes are getting higher.
I bet.
Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll see how this clash of perspectives plays out and what it reveals about the ongoing search for unity in a world brimming with diverse beliefs.
I'm still trying to process everything we've heard.
No, right.
It's like this deep dive has opened up this whole new dimension to religious history, one that I never even knew existed. We've got Confucianism, Buddhism, Islam, and now this Israelitish Christian is claiming they're all connected to the Hebrew Bible.
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Right.
Back on that ship, though, I imagine the tension is palpable.
Oh, yeah.
Falilya Mugata and Arjuna have just heard their entire worldview challenged.
Exactly. They've dedicated their lives to these faiths. They're not just going to say, oh, you're right, we were wrong all along.
You'd think not.
But at the same time, this Christian has presented some pretty compelling evidence.
He has.
The prophecies, the historical timeline, the whole Zoroaster connection.
It's a lot to take in.
How does the book handle their reaction?
Well, it acknowledges that they'd likely be resistant, maybe even a little offended.
I can see that.
I mean, their traditions have deep roots,
Right.
complex philosophies.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be easy to reconcile those with the idea that they're essentially offshoots of something else.
It's like having your whole identity called into question. But the thing that struck me about this Christian character is that he doesn't come across as, like, arrogant or condescending.
That's true.
He seems genuinely interested in finding common ground.
Right.
He even acknowledges the limits of reason, suggesting that faith is essential for understanding these deeper truths.
That's an interesting point.
He's not saying my way is the only way.
Right.
He's proposing a framework for understanding how these different paths might ultimately lead to the same destination.
And this is where his message of unity comes in.
Okay.
He argues that despite their differences,
Mm-hmm.
all religions at their core are pointing toward the same fundamental truths.
Like what?
The existence of a higher power,
Okay.
the importance of living a moral life,
Mm-hmm.
and the hope for a better world.
It's a beautiful vision, a world where these religious divisions fade away and are replaced by this recognition of our shared humanity, our
Right.
common spiritual ancestry.
It's a powerful idea.
It makes you wonder if that's even possible.
Yeah, especially in today's world.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines about religious conflict and kind of lose sight of that potential for unity.
For sure.
But maybe that's the challenge this book is presenting to us,
Mm.
to look beyond those surface differences
Mm.
and recognize those shared threads that bind us together.
Yeah.
So if we're taking this book seriously, the Christian is proposing that this unity can only be achieved by acknowledging the Hebrew Bible as the source of it all.
A big ask.
That seems like a pretty big ask. For the other characters, and maybe even for us as listeners,
Right.
do they ever come around to his way of thinking?
That's the intriguing part. The book doesn't give us any easy answers.
Really?
It ends with this call for brotherhood, this belief in a future kingdom of righteousness and peace.
Mm-hmm.
But it also acknowledges that the other characters might not fully agree.
Mm-hmm.
It leaves us with this sense of unresolved tension, a recognition that these questions are still very much alive today.
So what are we supposed to make of this whole conversation? What's the takeaway here?
I think it challenges us to be more open-minded, to consider the possibility that there might be more than one path to truth,
Mm-hmm.
and that the search for unity begins with a willingness to understand and respect perspectives that are different from our own, even if they challenge our deeply held beliefs.
Yeah, that's something I'm definitely going to be reflecting on. It also makes you realize that history is full of surprises.
It is.
I never would have imagined that a fictional conversation from 1894 could be so relevant to our lives today.
It's amazing.
Who knows what other hidden connections are waiting to be uncovered? What other stories are yet to be told?
That's the magic of a deep dive like this. It expands our horizons and opens up new possibilities, new ways of seeing the world.
It does.
It leaves us with a sense of wonder and a desire to keep exploring, to keep questioning, keep searching for those threads that connect us all.
Well said. This deep dive has definitely left me with a lot to think about. And if you're feeling the same way, here's something to ponder. Could there be a single source for all the moral and spiritual impulses we see across different cultures? And how does this historical perspective shape our understanding of religious conflict and the search for unity in today's world? We encourage you to explore these questions, draw your own conclusions, and most importantly, keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. Our